Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Football in Focus. I'm Ryan Downey. Joining me, as always, is Kevin O'Connell. We're presented by 360 Sports and KO Football. Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing well, Ryan. Sorry, I was not able to overcome technical difficulties yesterday. I'm going to go ahead and take that one. That's on me. Won't happen again.
Now, when we sort of look at our viewership and we talk to our producers, my understanding is that our audience is 98% female, and when responding to different surveys, they suggest that the reason they tune in is for you, and they were unfortunately not able to see you basically topless at the pool at the Las Vegas Four Seasons yesterday when we tried this at our usually scheduled time. So realistically, I apologize for all of our viewers that didn't get to see that.
Well, that's funny to hear that because I was checking some of our fan surveys that we sent out, and the coif that your hair and that what the humidity is doing to your hair lately seems to be something that's really drawing quite a bit of interest.
Well, the reality is our producer asked me to blow dry my hair, and I haven't used a blow dryer since I was in 8th grade changing the blade on my hockey stick, so I'm not sure I was doing it properly.
Likely story there with the hockey story, Ryan. But
Yeah, I mean,
it's good to be on with you, and I'm glad we could catch up.
yeah, for sure. It was interesting college weekend. We sort of downplayed, I think, the importance of this weekend with a lot of teams on byes, with a lot of teams sort of playing out of conference for the last time before they entered the conference play. But we saw Florida State really struggle. I know they didn't have Jameis Winston. Him not playing may have been the best thing for his Heisman candidacy because it showed how mediocre that team really can be without him at the helm. Oregon struggled with the offensive line issues there. I know we're going to get into that. But what did you see in that Florida State-Clemson primetime game that maybe leads you to believe that they're not as invincible as we had kind of thought?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I saw. I saw the number one team in the country without their Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. I thought Florida State deserves some credit for extending that extension all the way through the first half all the way through the end of the game. I didn't think Jameis deserves the right at this point with what he's gone through and I don't even want to say immaturity. To me, the arrogance of knowing that his actions would have negative outcomes and effects on his teammates and coaching staffs, and he still does the things that he does. I think it was a big-time learning moment for him. Was fascinated to see him come out for warm-ups in full uniform, even though it was very apparent Coach Fisher told him not to do that, so I thought that was interesting. I thought that signified maybe a little bit of the problem going on there is being told one thing and doing another just because you maybe feel like it. I thought ESPN did a good job showing some of that dynamic and the interaction there between the two. But as far as the on-field football game that didn't include Jameis Winston, I thought that Sean McGuire played well enough to give his team a chance to win. I think Clemson's going to kick themselves for some things that they weren't able to take advantage of in that game. I think Clemson's got some big-time NFL talent on that defense, a lot of speed and a lot of good things going on there. But that's a game that I think around the country, people, as we watched it, we may have all been expecting Florida State to lose that football game. The way they lost the momentum in the game and really had a tough time trying to get it back. They were able to do that late with some big throws in the passing game, maybe more of a breakdown on Clemson's part. But I thought that game was one of the better games of the weekend. I know that there were some other games around the SEC that I was really keeping a close eye on. I actually picked Mississippi State to beat LSU. I just did not trust the youngsters there at quarterback for LSU and playing against a pretty good Mississippi State front seven. Expected that one to be tight, but Dak Prescott there at Mississippi State might be the best dual threat quarterback maybe in the country right now, not named Marcus Mariota. I saw your face start to react there, so I figured I'd better save myself before I got too far. But Missouri going down, there's some other games as well. I thought Florida would give Alabama a little bit more of a game than they did, and after that triple overtime win over Kentucky the week before, I expected Will Muschamp's group to play a little bit better, and they really didn't, and he's right there back on that hot seat that's hotter than ever.
Yeah, no, the SEC was kind of a topsy-turvy weekend. The one thing that sort of struck me was I don't understand how, with how good the old ball coach in South Carolina is, how do they look so pedestrian against a Vanderbilt team that for the last decade or longer has been sort of the doormat of the SEC after a big win against Georgia? How do they almost lose that game, and how do they not kind of show up for that? Is that coaching? Is that leadership on the team? What sort of contributes to a team just not showing up like that?
I think, Ryan, only really they know that in that locker room and on the coaching staff what contributed to them not playing well. I would just say that sometimes we forget, and I know in my profession I definitely forget, that these kids are college kids. And I know it kind of contradicts my Jameis Winston take, but as a football team, as a group of however many 115 guys on a roster, they were coming off a huge win for them. You beat a Georgia team, you play as well as they did, the execution on the offensive side, defensively figuring out a way to force some turnovers there and keep Georgia out of the end zone to win the game. 7 days later, they had to play a football team that's every single thing they're trying to do right now is grow and build at Vanderbilt, and they were able to at least hang around, and I think that's a credit to that staff and those players there. But I think college football in general, through this kind of right before you really get into the meat of your schedule, you're looking down the road and you're seeing, especially when you're an SEC team like South Carolina playing in a pretty funky Western division, I think you're looking down the road and seeing the yellow brick road to Atlanta, to that SEC championship game, and it's hard not to overlook a team like Vanderbilt when you do have to play some of the teams that they still have to play. But I think that goes for a lot of college football. I think it goes for a lot of teams maybe in the Pac-12, teams like Oregon, going to Pullman, Washington. We talked about it last week, and you and I both said it's a tough place to go play there. They're going to need to play their very best, and it still could end up being a shootout. And I think if they don't have Marcus Mariota as their quarterback, I think we're talking about Washington State and Connor Holiday today and not Oregon surviving and moving forward. But I'm really impressed with that Oregon team, and I think each and every week there's a new guy that kind of jumps up and grabs some headlines off that team. And I think that's a testament to their recruiting and the type of athletes they have there. And really right now, I mean, with a big Pac-12 matchup coming up this week with two injured quarterbacks, who knows what we're going to see from Brett Hundley or Taylor Kelly. I know Taylor Kelly's been ruled out. Oregon really has to feel like they're in the driver's seat, but like we were just talking about, you cannot fall asleep and you cannot expect or take anything for granted in major college football, because you'll be beaten the second that you do that.
No, I think that's fair. Just going back to the Florida State issue for a quick second, I got to give a lot of credit to Jimbo Fisher. Not only is he willing to sit his Heisman Trophy quarterback for what in large part is the toughest game on their schedule. They open up against, I think, Oklahoma State. They have Notre Dame later in the year, and Notre Dame is not a soft opponent this year. So that is their marquee game in a relatively down ACC. And he decides to sit him for the whole game. And I think that a ton of credit is due to him. I also think he probably went out on a limb and stepped up for his relatively immature quarterback when he basically blamed the athletic training staff for setting out his pads in advance of kind of giving him notice that he wasn't going to be playing. I don't know if I necessarily buy that. I think that he basically gave Jameis Winston a little bit of an out there. But I think that coach is doing a pretty great job in trying to discipline a team and to lead a team that's comprised of some guys that are capable of getting out of hand. So I think he's doing a great job with that program and with some really challenging issues right now in college football. You mentioned Oregon. The one thing, and I've watched Oregon for a number of years now from a recruiting standpoint and from a fan standpoint, the one thing that we've come to know about that Oregon or those Oregon teams is how dynamic they are, how you don't necessarily know how to prepare for them week in and week out. They've become very one-dimensional. I think they realize that they have kind of a golden goose in Marcus Mariota that can do everything, that can get them out of all sorts of trouble. They're down 3 offensive linemen. Hopefully they're getting Jake Fisher back in a couple of weeks when their schedule starts to get more challenging. But they don't run the ball unless it's Marcus Mariota running very well anymore. They're a very one-dimensional team. He threw 5 touchdown passes, basically single-handedly won that game for them. But I'm not sure it's a live by the sword, die by the sword concept. And if they don't get some more contributions from elsewhere, is it time to worry if you're a Eugene native?
I don't think so, just because of how golden that golden goose is. You talk about Marcus Mariota. He was every bit the player he is now a year ago. He's probably playing in the National Football League if he doesn't hurt his knee and takes that Oregon team to maybe where they could have gone. I think the ability that he has to rally that team and rally Oregon in general it's going to be tested, Ryan. It's going to be tested 2 or 3 more times. But I just continue to think to myself how much this feels like it's Oregon's year. And they've always been that team that you're like, if they could just figure out a way to overcome, to win the games when they're not at their best. Oregon typically plays 10 to 11 really good games a year, and they have 1 or 2 kind of games where you're scratching your head and you're saying, how is this possible? And in prior years, they've lost those games. And I think this is the year that they figure out a way to win those games in the end, and I think their quarterback is the huge reason why they do it. Now, with all that being said, I still think that there's some teams in the Pac-12 we're not talking enough about. Maybe because injuries, maybe not, but I think we're going to have some great conversation throughout the rest of this season.
Yeah, the one thing that kind of scares me right now is Oregon's defense. I don't think they've played up to potential yet, and they probably, and this is without any kind of rhetoric, they probably have 4 first-rounders on that defense. There are 2 interior defensive linemen, there's a corner, and there's a linebacker that are all going to be drafted in the top 50 or 75, and they haven't necessarily played like it yet. And I don't know whether that's one of the issues of they just think they don't necessarily have to bring their A game each and every week. But when that defense clicks on all cylinders, I think nationally people will recognize Oregon as more than just an offensive powerhouse. And if those things come to fruition, I think they're going to be really tough to beat. The one team that we don't necessarily talk about nationally because they're in sort of a down Big 12 is Oklahoma. I think Vegas changed them to the odds-on favorite to win the national championship now after Oregon and Florida State struggle this week. Maybe premature to do so, but we don't talk about Oklahoma enough, and I think they are as talented and as promising as anybody in the country.
Yeah, I would just say that I think Oklahoma is going to potentially be a team that has to go undefeated to find their way into the playoff. And I would not say that same comment about Oregon, or I think a 1-loss Georgia team could end up finding their way in the back door of that playoff. I think Florida State is a team that probably with their schedule needs to win every game. You mentioned it already, that Notre Dame game. To me, each and every week I watched the Fighting Irish play and Everett Golston at quarterback. That game gets circled even more and more. It's got 3 or 4 layers on that circle now because I think that's going to be a heck of a ball game. But the biggest thing for me, and you just mentioned it, is I think that each and every team in the quote-unquote top 5 right now, I think you can run through a list of, I wouldn't even have said their defense first as Oregon's kryptonite possibly. I would have said their offensive line because starting a freshman at left tackle, a former walk-on at right tackle, and you give up 7 sacks to a Washington State team that probably, let's be honest, is not in the top 5 in the Pac-12 as far as the defensive front goes. If Washington State gets you 7 times, what's a team like UCLA, if they're playing at their best like we expect them to when those teams eventually meet, what's a team like that going to do? And I know that's going to be a huge game in the Pac-12 schedule. Hopefully Brett Hundley's healthy for that one, and we get to see 2 of the best in the nation go at each other. But when you look at Florida State, the lack of a running game, to me, without Jameis Winston playing, I was expecting to see them run the ball all night long, and they just really weren't able to do it. You mentioned Oklahoma. I think they just allow too many big plays. I think Oklahoma is going to be a team that, against some of these offenses in the Big 12, I think at some point they're going to run out of the run and hit mentality, and they're going to get scored on early and often. I thought it might be the West Virginia game. I know maybe that's one of the reasons the Vegas bookmakers changed their thoughts on that, because a lot of people were laying a lot of money down on West Virginia to win that game. That was kind of the upset pick for a lot of people last week. But we can go on and on. I think that's why this is so exciting, because there really isn't that perfect team. There really isn't that team where you say it's them and everybody else. And I think that's why the SEC is going to be fun to watch. The Pac-12 is going to be fun to watch. The Big Ten probably being left behind, and I think they're one Michigan State bad performance. I wouldn't even say a loss. I think they're one Michigan State bad performance away from completely losing their identity in the college football playoff in 2014.
It was a bit of a weather issue in Ann Arbor when Utah went in there and beat Michigan this week. You know Brady Hoke fairly well just because of his time at San Diego State. Is this his last year? I mean, it seems hard to believe with how much success he had at San Diego State, then getting the big offer in Michigan and sort of was the savior of that program. What's going on there? I mean, you just can't lose a game like that in back-to-back weeks at home and expect to keep your job.
I actually am on, I'm refreshing ESPN.com and refreshing my Twitter timeline because I think that his days are numbered. And I hate to say that because I am a Brady Hoke fan, and there's a lot of coaches on that staff who I have a relationship with. He was only at San Diego State 1 year, but what he was able to start as far as a turnaround and the positive feelings around and for that program, you just hope nothing but the best for him despite leaving after only 1 year. And you hoped that he would be able to go to his quote-unquote dream job and take that team to where they wanted to go. He goes out and hires a Doug Nussmeier as his offensive coordinator. He's got Greg Madison there. The coaching staff, name-wise, is as good as maybe in the whole entire country, which is why it's a surprise that they just have not been able to overcome certain aspects of not only what they need to do at home, but Michigan, let's be honest, they expect to compete for national championships, never mind lose back-to-back games at home and lose to a Utah team that, let's give them some credit, they went in there and just overcame the weather delays and everything that happened and was able to win a football game. I just think that is – I'd keep your eye on that one because everything I'm hearing, everything you feel – for Brady Hoke, you just don't expect him to be the head football coach at Michigan very much longer if things continue to stay as they have.
Yeah, and maybe you mentioned sort of the powerhouse nature of that coaching staff. It may just be a factor of too many cooks in the kitchen there, not getting sort of the message to those kids and not being on the same page. The craziest thing in college football this week may have been the ending of that Cal-Arizona game. I think that the Cal bookstore actually sent out an email to the fan base, of which I'm one of, announcing a 25% discount at the bookstore and congratulations on the win against Arizona with a minute left in the game, and then Arizona completes what is probably one of the bigger miracle comebacks since Cordell Stewart, sort of shades of the band is on the field, 1982 Cal Stanford. I don't want to say karma came back to lose them one, but that was just nuts. And I don't understand how an athletic department can send out an email like that before the game's even over.
Can't happen. Not in this day and age. I know social media and online content, and even, we're sitting here today having a full-blown conversation 50 miles from each other. It's all great, but you can't allow it to have that happen. There's too many people working really, really hard, and too many players on that team where they, as a program now, should be embarrassed. That cannot happen. I don't even chalk it up. It was on the Sunday Night Countdowns, come on, man. They basically said, they treated it as a joke, but to me that's a serious thing. When football games aren't over, especially a team that should have learned by now with their own history, like you just talked about, that football game is never over until the coaches are shaking hands at midfield. I love seeing it, knowing that Arizona. They didn't know. The players on the field didn't know that the bookstore had sent out a 3-0 email to its fans, but the fact that they go down and win the game in that capacity in Arizona at a home game, memory for an entire lifetime for those kids. And I can tell you as a quarterback, I never threw a Hail Mary. I threw a lot of interceptions on Hail Marys. That's what I tell people all the time. That's why my interception numbers were so high, because we threw Hail Marys every game.
Sure. Yeah. 2 or 3 a game in some cases.
Each quarter. We were very big on getting a touchdown to end each quarter, so that's where a lot of those mistakes came from. But great for Arizona. Keep an eye on the Wildcats because they can score points, and when you score like they do, if you're a team like Oregon and you have a couple turnovers here or there, maybe you struggle to protect the passer, I would keep an eye on a team like that.
No, and that freshman quarterback in Arizona is special. I was at their first game of the year, like we talked about, against UNLV, and I think he threw for something like 500 yards and was basically kind of the next, I don't want to say Johnny Manziel, but it was reminiscent. And I think they're going to be special, and he's only going to grow and learn, and they're going to be dangerous in the Pac-12 South. interesting week in the NFL. We had 2 weeks, week 1 and week 2, that was kind of marked by upset city. This week went relatively chalk with most of the favorites winning. But the Thursday night game kind of jumped out at me. Atlanta beats Tampa Bay by 42 points. Lovie Smith is a Super Bowl coach. That staff is a tremendous staff. They've got a ton of talent. How does a team in the NFL, with the salary cap, with how much parity that the NFL Shield continues to tell us that there is, how does a team lose by 42 points on national television?
Well, I think they ran into an Atlanta team that basically came out, beat the Saints week 1, feeling great about themselves, and then go and play a Cincinnati Bengal team who we maybe need to start talking about the Bengals a little more with what they've been able to do early on in the season. I know I have not given them enough credit, and I think I'm going to definitely start keeping an eye on what they're doing there. But Tampa Bay, and I think Lovie Smith needs to call some of his buddies, and some of those buddies being Herm Edwards, who I know very well, and some of the other national analysts that are huge fans of Lovie Smith. They're putting their buddy in a tough spot right now, because when you pick the Buccaneers to go to the Super Bowl, or you pick them to win that division with the teams that they have to beat and play and overcome in that division, and maybe more importantly, the quarterbacks they have to overcome in that division, they're putting their buddy in a tough spot. And I think Lovie Smith is going to build a product there, but when you run that style defense that is very much that Tampa 2, keep everything in front and beat people with our pass rush, and you play Drew Brees and you play Matt Ryan, and you basically allow him to sit back and know what the coverage is every time, man, oh man, if you're not going to get pressure on him, you're going to see record-breaking nights, or 21-24 or whatever Matt Ryan was the other night. Drew Brees went score for score with him, or at least with Atlanta there in the opener. And watching Carolina last night against the Pittsburgh team, I really do think that has a chance to materialize into a 2-horse race with Atlanta and New Orleans. I know New Orleans did start 0-2, but you just never can count out Drew Brees, and I think we're just seeing the evidence of just how special and important that franchise quarterback really is.
Yeah, you mentioned the Cincinnati Bengals. They are 3-0. The Arizona Cardinals are 3-0. Neither of those teams were really talked about as we start the season, because they don't necessarily have quarterbacks that you think are first ballot Hall of Fame quarterbacks yet. But both defenses are playing tremendously well, and they're winning games with their defenses. Is it too early to call those AFC and NFC contenders at this point, because they've started out so well, because they're riding great defenses, and because they're getting good quarterback playing in Arizona? That's a second-string quarterback that's playing well.
And especially in Arizona, the injuries they've been able to overcome already. You never know what's going to happen with Carson Palmer. That the nerve in the shoulder, I mean, that could be, he could feel better tomorrow morning, or he might not ever feel better. That's a scary thing, and I'm a big fan of Carson Palmer as a person and a player, so that's something to keep an eye on. But I do not think it's too early at all. When you beat a 49ers team the way they did, and if Larry Fitzgerald doesn't fumble the ball late, they potentially could win that game going away by 10 to 13 or 14 points. So the Arizona Cardinals and what they did to a San Diego Chargers team in their opener, the defense that they play, and same with Cincinnati, they can cause some issues. They can get you off the field. And if their offenses are playing well, which they are built to play well with some of the weapons they have on the outside and their ability to run the football, and maybe even more so than that, Ellington and Gio Bernard, the fact that they add such an element, a playmaking element out of the backfield that really cause a lot of trouble. I know they've caused me some trouble there in fantasy football. The defenses that I need to shut them down are having trouble finding those guys. So I think it's never too early to talk about contenders. I think sometimes it can be early to kind of put a team to bed and say they're done for the year, especially in the NFL landscape where things can change so incredibly fast. So
I think you're due a lot of credit. You said that San Diego is going to go cross country and beat Buffalo, and it's a Buffalo team that nobody really gave credit to in the preseason because of how paltry they looked. but they go beat Chicago at Chicago. They beat a Miami team at home that had just basically dominated the New England Patriots. Sure, that's a division game. Sure, that's at home. But San Diego went in there and handled them, and they played great. I know that you're, to a certain extent, a San Diego Chargers homer, but you got to feel pretty good about how they're playing right now.
You do, and I expected them to win by at least 10. I don't know if I said that or not last week. I firmly believe, and this is somebody who played the position or attempted to play the position at that level. I know how important that position is, and I know how important over the course of 16 games the plays, or maybe the plays that aren't made from the quarterback position, define seasons. And Phillip Rivers, to me right now, would be my selection as the league MVP right now. Peyton Manning was one overtime miraculous drive away from saying, hold on, Phillip Rivers, it's still my award, but not able to finish it up in Seattle. Phillip Rivers has already beaten the champions from a year ago. They go on the road on a short week and beat a Buffalo team that's 2-0, and they really do it with him just at the controls. And unfortunately, I think the Charger team by the week, for me, is taking, even by winning, they're taking steps back with the injuries. Danny Woodhead being lost for the season. Manti Te'o breaks his foot, and he was maybe looking better than ever as far as moving sideline to sideline and laterally being a stalwart in the middle of that defense. You look at the injury at center. Nick Hardwick is a guy that I don't think we'll be able to talk about enough, just because you can never talk about the center enough. Fans just don't understand how important that position is. They are just very, very much struggling right now, keeping guys healthy. Ryan Matthews is still probably 4 to 5 weeks away. As we speak, they're probably working out veteran running backs. They may have even picked their guy and signed him. I know it's the day off in the NFL. I imagine we'll hear some news later today. I just think with Donald Brown, and you saw Donald Brown in that game, Ryan, 32 carries once Danny Woodhead got hurt for about 80, maybe 81 yards, 82 yards. That's Donald Brown in a nutshell. When you make him be the only back, the featured back, he's going to grind. He will continue to tote that rock as long as you call his number. But you're not going to get those 10, 15, 20-yard bursts from him that you might see if he's one of 3 running backs, where he can be fresh and really have his role. So really keep an eye on what the Chargers do with that running back position. They've got Brandon Oliver, the University of Buffalo all-time leading rusher, but he's a little bit of a similar back, not really a change of pace type guy. And what's made Danny Woodhead so valuable is on third down to have a guy that can run, catch, but maybe most importantly, be an unbelievable blitz pickup running back and really keep Phillip Rivers upright to be able to find Keenan Allen and Antonio Gates and the rest of that offense. So unfortunately, I love the Chargers team, and I love them coming out of camp. I expected them to be an 11 or 12 win team, and with each injury, it just puts that much more pressure on Phillip Rivers, and I don't like that, because when it was the pressure to make a play instead of just distribute the ball was there 2 or 3 years ago when we saw Phillip Rivers' interceptions, those numbers go up into the 20s, because he was just trying to do too much instead of just distribute and run that no-huddle offense. So really something to keep an eye on.
No, I think we're starting to get a clearer picture of who the contenders are in the NFL and in college football. I think we're far enough into the season where we can start to make sort of hypotheses about what's going to happen, but we don't have a complete picture yet. So I think we're sort of at that early stage in the season in both college and pro football, and it's really fun. Wanted to give a shout-out to Saints second-year tight end Josh Hill, who surpassed his career receiving yardage this week when Ben Watson went down, had a touchdown, had a couple of great special teams plays in New Orleans win. So great job, Josh. We'll be back, hopefully, at our regular time on Mondays, which is becoming less and less regular as Kevin spends more and more time poolside. But I will probably have to shave my head or do something to appease our audience that's furious with my hairstyles. So hopefully that'll be done by next week, and we'll see you next Monday at 2 o'clock Pacific, 5 o'clock Eastern. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, Ryan, I got to tell you, the summer's winding down, so the poolside scene might not be as electric as it's been, but I could tell you the Four Seasons Las Vegas did send me a very nice Twitter note apologizing for the internet issues yesterday, and I just wanted to let everybody know that that place is phenomenal. Their service was phenomenal, and it was probably more so my fault and maybe the night before's fault for the technical difficulties, we'll go ahead and call them. But Really
Well,
fun, Ryan, catching up, man. It's obvious that you guys there at 360 Sports have a whole bunch of clients that are exciting. I saw that Josh Hill touchdown. I wanted to text you about it, and I was all excited, but I was too busy worrying about all my parlays. So
no,
we'll talk next week.
again, I'm glad you enjoyed one of your last weeks of freedom. You're on baby watch, and what I'm probably going to need from you is a firm commitment that even if the baby's born next Monday, you're still going to be on Football in Focus with us, because that clearly is more important than your wife and your new son.
Well, I've already called down to Scripps La Jolla Hospital and had them install a brand new Wi-Fi package there, so that if push comes to shove, literally, I might be able to stay downstairs and be. I don't know if we can be real time in the room. I don't know if my wife would allow that, but we can sure talk some football. And I'm sure after another great weekend of football, great Pac-12 matchup, I know you and I will both be at the San Diego State game Saturday night. We'll have some great stuff to talk about. Really look forward to it, Ryan. Always do.
Sounds good. We'll see you Monday.
All right, bud. Take care.
All right, bye.
Can I unmute my TV now? There's breaking news going on in the world of
Yeah,
football.
we're apparently still live, so people get a glimpse into what my day is actually like. I'm going to go change diapers in about 2 minutes. The baby's screaming.